Today we are cracking open the books on Expand, an absolute giant in the U.S. energy scene. So let's get right into it and break down their latest earnings report to see what really makes this company tick. Okay, so right off the bat, you have to wrap your head around the scale we're talking about here. Expandas is pumping out roughly 7.4 billion cubic feet equivalent of natural gas every single day. That is just a wild number. But what does BCFD actually mean in the real world? It's just industry jargon, right? So let's translate that into something that makes a little more sense. Here's what it means. The amount of gas they produce in just one day is enough to power millions and millions of homes all across America. So we're not just talking about a big company, we're talking about a foundational piece of the entire country's energy grid. And that massive scale brings us to the first big point we need to understand. The bottom line is this: Expand is, hands down, the biggest natural gas producer in the United States. Period. They aren't just a player, they are the player. And everything else we're going to talk about, their profits, their strategy, even their risks, it all flows from this one simple fact. But being the biggest doesn't automatically mean you're the best. You have to be smart and disciplined with all that size. So let's take a look at their 2025 scorecard to see how they're actually performing. So the first huge number that jumps out from their report: they've paid down a ton of debt. We're talking about a whopping $1.2 billion. And that's not by accident. It's part of a very deliberate plan to make their finances rock solid, especially after a big merger. It shows they're really focused on building a stable company for the long haul. But get this, while they were paying down all that debt, they were also sending a huge chunk of cash back to their investors. Almost $865 million went straight back to shareholders. And this is what's so key. They're doing both at the same time. They're making the company stronger, and they're rewarding the people who own it. That's the one-two punch of their whole model. Okay, so we've seen what they did. But how do they plan to keep this machine humming? Well, it all really boils down to a pretty simple philosophy: get more cash in the door while spending less to do it. Now, I know this chart looks a little complicated, but the idea behind it is actually super simple. They are obsessed with one thing: maximizing something called free cash flow. The whole game is finding that perfect sweet spot between production and price to make as much cold, hard cash as possible. So, what even is free cash flow? Well, think of it like this. It's the money a company has left over after paying all of its day-to-day bills and after spending the money it needs to maintain its equipment and keep the business running. It's basically the purest measure of a company's financial health. And this right here perfectly sums up their strategy. Notice the goal isn't to just grow and grow and grow. Nope. The goal is to keep production right around that 7.5 billion cubic feet per day mark, because that's the magic number that spits out the most cash. It's all about being profitable, not just being big. All right, so we've got the strategy, but where does all this happen? Let's take a look inside the engine room at the actual assets that make this whole thing work. They aren't spread out all over the country. They are laser focused on three absolute powerhouse regions: the Haynesville Shale down south, and then two spots up in the Appalachian Mountains in the northeast. This concentration is a huge part of their success. And this table gives you a great snapshot of just how massive each region is. You can see the Haynesville is the biggest producer, but Northeast Appalachia isn't far behind. Honestly, any one of these regions could be its own massive company. When you put them all together, it's a true empire. But here's the real kicker. Just having a lot of land and a lot of wells isn't enough. Their secret weapon, the thing that really sets them apart, is how incredibly efficient they are at getting gas out of the ground. Take a look at the Haynesville. This chart basically shows you who gets the most bang for their buck. For Expand, it costs them about $2.20 to produce a unit of gas. Their competitors, on average, they're spending over $3. That is a gigantic cost advantage. So is that just a fluke? Let's jump over to Northeast Appalachia. And it's the exact same story. Expand is way down at $1.80, while the average competitor is close to $2.50. It's clear they're getting way more gas for every dollar they spend. And just to complete the trifecta, it's the same deal in Southwest Appalachia. They are consistently a top-tier, low-cost operator. So why? How are they so much better? Well, it all comes back to that massive scale. It lets them use the best technology, gather better data,
and run their logistics way more smoothly than smaller players. It creates this powerful feedback loop. Their size creates efficiency, and that efficiency generates the cash that fuels their entire strategy. Now, of course, it's not all sunshine and roses. To really understand the company, we have to talk about the challenges they face. It's time for a little reality check. We've boiled down all the fine print into 4 big risk categories. First up, market volatility. The price of natural gas can go on a wild roller coaster ride, and that directly impacts their bottom line. Second, operational dangers. Let's be real, this is a tough business. You've got the inherent risks of drilling, pipeline maintenance, and now even the threat of major cyber attacks. Third, geopolitics. A war on the other side of the world or a decision from OPEC Plus can completely change the game for them overnight. And finally, regulatory changes. A new environmental law or a different tax policy could come along and add huge costs or force them to change how they operate. These are the powerful headwinds they're constantly navigating. So when you boil it all down, Expand has built this incredibly powerful, cash-generating machine, all based on huge scale and unbelievable efficiency. But the big question, the one that hangs over this whole story, is this. They've built the perfect engine for the world we live in today, but is it the right engine for the world of tomorrow?